Welcome to a new episode of Cheaters Always Cheat. Like, subscribe, and share to stay connected.
My wife, whom I'll refer to as M, cheated on me with a so-called friend of mine. Let's call him J for the sake of the story. Let me give you a bit of background. We met when I was 22 at a friend's wedding. She happened to be a close friend of the bride, while I was friends with the groom. The seating arrangement at the wedding was cleverly designed to bring us together. When I first laid eyes on her, I was completely blown away by her beauty. As we sat down and started talking, we quickly discovered that we had a lot in common. It felt like an instant connection. We chatted, enjoyed our dinner, and later hit the dance floor. We danced and drank throughout the night, and at one point, we ended up sharing a passionate kiss right there in the middle of the dance floor. Our friends, the bride and groom, spotted us and approached, excited to know what was going on between us. They were playing matchmakers, you see. We just shrugged it off and continued with our night. We didn't exchange numbers that night, but about a week later I received a text from her asking me out. The bride had given her my number. I happily said yes, and that's how our relationship began. Overall, our relationship was great. We had minor arguments here and there, but nothing too serious. We never really fought. Eventually, after about 2 years of dating, I proposed to her, and less than a year later, we were married. Our marriage hit rock bottom after a little over a year. As our first anniversary approached, I started noticing some things that bothered me. She became more protective of her phone, started having girls' nights more often, and our bed life was almost non-existent. I brought up these concerns multiple times, but she dismissed them, telling me that I was just being insecure. It felt like she didn't care about my feelings or the effort I was making to communicate with her. As a result, I became more distant. I stopped giving her a goodbye kiss before leaving for work, and our conversations became minimal, unless it was something important. One night while she was sleeping, I couldn't resist the urge to check her phone and laptop. I skimmed through her texts, emails, and messenger apps, but found nothing incriminating. Based on stories I had read, I decided to search her car as well. I took her keys and discovered a second phone. In that moment, I knew exactly what was going on. However, I wanted solid evidence before confronting her. I didn't want her to come up with excuses like it only happened once, or any other foolish explanations. I went through the phone and discovered only one specific number. I read through every message, connected the phone to my computer, and printed out all the messages and photos. That night, I dedicated my time to researching divorce lawyers from my home office. I spent hours reading lawyers' biographies and finally found one I liked. I emailed him, but since it was a Saturday, he wasn't available at the office. Curiosity got the best of me, and I wanted to know who the guy behind the number was. I grabbed my phone and typed in the number, pretending to be from Spectrum, as most people have Spectrum. To my surprise, Jay's contact popped up. It took me a moment to connect the dots, but when I did, I completely lost it. I started yelling and cursing in my office. My wife heard the commotion and opened the door to check on me, but I immediately told her to get out. She closed the door and went to our room. I'd never cursed at my wife or raised my voice like that before. I remained in my office for the entire day, silently seething and glaring at the wall. Feeling the need for a drink, I called one of my friends from the wedding, the groom, and asked if he would join me. He sensed something was wrong in my voice and asked if I was okay. I admitted that I wasn't and that I really needed a drink. Without saying much, I gathered all the printed materials and headed to the bar. I got to the bar before my friend T arrived and wasted no time ordering 4 shots of Jack Daniels and a beer. By the time T showed up, I was downing my last shot. He immediately asked me what was going on, and I didn't hold back. I told him straight up that M was cheating on me. T expressed sympathy, and I asked if he wanted to know who she was cheating with. When I revealed it was Jay, T visibly got irritated. It turns out T was the one who introduced me to Jay, but all he could say was sorry repeatedly. Jay and I were never super close, just friendly whenever we bumped into each other at gatherings. I asked T not to mention this to anyone since I just found out and hadn't even talked to M or a lawyer yet. I specifically requested him not to tell his wife, and if she asked about me, to say I was having work problems. T agreed, and we spent the rest of the night drinking and talking. Eventually, around 3 a.m., I called an Uber and headed home. It was the first time I checked my phone since calling T, and I saw missed calls and numerous texts from M asking where I was, when I would be home, and if I was okay. When I got home, she was asleep on the couch. Without saying a word, I went straight to our bedroom and went to sleep. The next morning, she was in bed with me, so I quickly got dressed and left the house. I went to pick up my car and headed to my office, immersing myself in work for the entire day. I returned home around 10 p.m., and to my surprise, my wife was there to greet me. She mentioned she had made dinner for me and asked if I wanted her to heat it up. I declined her offer and went straight to bed. Shortly after, she followed me and started asking what was wrong with me. I told her to leave me alone and let me sleep. Despite my request, she continued pestering me until I reached my breaking point and yelled at her to stop and go away. The next morning, I received an email from the lawyer requesting a meeting later in the day. I confirmed the appointment and prepared for my day. As I headed downstairs to leave, I noticed that M had prepared breakfast and wanted to talk. I took a small plate of food and sat down. She began discussing how I had been acting differently and went on and on about the changes she noticed. She wanted to know why, so I simply told her that work had been extremely stressful and that it would soon be over. I finished eating and informed her that I had to go. I went to my office and counted down the minutes until it was time to meet with the lawyer. Before leaving, I told my assistant that I was going out to lunch with a client, since my wife would occasionally call my workplace, and then I left. The meeting with the lawyer went smoothly, and I provided him with all the evidence I had gathered on my wife. He expressed his sympathy for the situation and mentioned that we live in an at-fault state, meaning my wife would have no claim on most of my money. I hadn't even considered that, as my main focus was divorcing her as soon as possible. The lawyer asked if he could keep the evidence, but I preferred him to make copies instead. I hadn't revealed to my wife that I knew about everything yet, and I didn't want to hear her excuses. The lawyer agreed and had his assistant make the copies. I inquired about when my wife would be served with the divorce papers, and he informed me it would take about 2 weeks. I thanked him and left his office. When I returned home, I intended to confront my wife, but she wasn't there. So I called her, but she didn't answer. I tried calling again, but still no response. In frustration, I sent her a text saying, "I don't give a damn if you're with Jay right now. Get home. We need to talk." Surprisingly, she called me back within a minute, asking what I was talking about. I simply told her to come home immediately. About 15 minutes later, she finally arrived. I looked at her and sarcastically commented, "Wow, it took you about 15 minutes. Funny, that's roughly the same distance between here and Jay's place, isn't it?" She stared at me in disbelief, and I gave her a moment to collect herself. However, she continued looking at me without saying anything, so I bluntly said, "Well, seems like you have nothing to say." She attempted to deny and gaslight me, and I allowed her to carry on. She became increasingly agitated and started insulting me. I slammed my fist on the table to silence her and pulled out all the evidence I had gathered on her. I showed her the stack of papers and said, "Look at all these things I've collected about you." Then I went through each printout one by one. She pleaded with me to stop and started crying. She tried to apologize and told me she loved me. I replied, "Honey, what happened to that energy you had just a minute ago when you were busy degrading and insulting me?" She attempted to hug me and express how sorry she was, but I held out my hand and told her not to touch me. She suggested that I go to the bedroom and do whatever I want. I looked deeply into her eyes and said, "Sweetheart, I will never touch you again, and you know who else has these photos and messages? My lawyer. I'm divorcing you. Now pack a bag, gather your clothes, and get the hell out of my house." That was 3 days ago, and I haven't heard from her since. I made an appointment with my doctor to get tested for STDs in 2 days. Then I reached out to my father and some friends who offered support and advice. I declined their help since I have everything under control. Next, I contacted her family. I thanked her parents for welcoming me into their family, but informed them that M and I are getting divorced. I also mentioned that I would miss them, although I was relieved to be free from their suffocating presence. I told them to ask if they had any questions. While waiting for their response, I messaged M's sister, which was difficult because we were good friends, and I knew this would mess up that friendship. I apologized and let her know about the divorce, expressing gratitude for her acceptance and offering my support. Her parents eventually responded, expressing sorrow and asking why M hadn't informed them. I explained that M had been having an affair for at least a year, possibly even before our wedding, and suggested they reach out to her since she had left the house. They agreed to contact her and apologized for her actions. After dealing with her family, I approached Jay's fiancée. Surprisingly, it wasn't as difficult as I thought. I texted her and asked if we could meet for coffee. She agreed within minutes, and we met at a hipster coffee shop near her workplace. I directly informed her that Jay had been cheating on her with my wife for over a year. She was shocked, and I apologized for not telling her sooner, as I had been preoccupied with initiating the divorce. I explained how I discovered the affair and offered her the evidence I had gathered. She took the binder, looked through the messages and pictures, and began crying silently. I told her she could keep the binder. I had made extra copies to confront Jay or use it as needed. She thanked me, took the binder, and left appearing defeated. On a positive note, I have already packed most of M's belongings, clothes, jewelry, and even our wedding book and photos featuring her. If and when she returns for her belongings, I don't want her staying here any longer than necessary. And no, I didn't damage her clothes, except for a few picture frames. As of now, I've informed everyone I needed to, scheduled my doctor's appointment, and my lawyer is working hard to help me through this situation. About 90% of her belongings are packed, and if she stays out of my way, this divorce might just be the smoothest ever. After my drunken night, I woke up to the smell of breakfast, expecting it to be M trying to make up for everything. But to my surprise, it was M's sister, W. She apologized and explained that M had downplayed our issues to her. I shared the whole story with W, and she revealed that M claimed it was a one-time thing blown out of proportion. I made it clear that I have no intention of reconciling and told W to advise M to get a lawyer. W reassured me that she was there for me as a friend, not just because of her sister. We spent 2 days together, and then she left while I prepared for a trip to my cabin. I was gathering my hunting and fishing equipment. She asked if she could join me, but I told her as much as I would like that she should probably go check in on her sister. I'm grateful for her support. I got tested at the doctor's, and results are expected on Monday. I've also checked in with Jay's fiancée, offering to listen if she needs to vent. In the past few days, my doctor confirmed that I'm clean, which wasn't surprising considering the lack of intimacy between M and me. I reached out to Jay's fiancée, who is currently staying with her family. We met for coffee and talked about the situation. She's confused and unsure whether to forgive Jay or move on. I shared my perspective on cheating and emphasized the importance of making decisions for oneself. The following day, I got a message from my lawyer that M had successfully been served at work. I thanked him for all his work, especially in the time frame he's gotten it done. Not long after that, W called and told me M hasn't left her room all day and she's sobbing in bed. I told her she was served, and he is probably realizing how bad she messed up. I'm prepared for a potential confrontation from M and have a friend ready to act as a witness. I went around to all the cameras that I had up and made sure they were working properly, both the ones inside and outside. I won't end up in jail because of this woman. Turns out I was right, because M showed up at my house, banging on the door and screaming to be let in. I immediately called my friend and W to come over because M is causing a scene at my door. She was hurling curses at me, begging me to let her in, and calling me every name in the book while accusing me of being heartless. Blah, blah, blah. I can't deny that she had a point. But while she was screaming and banging on the door, all I could do was laugh. I started wondering why she didn't just use her keys to enter, or at least that's what I thought. When my friend arrived, M was still screaming and cursing, so he decided to start recording on his phone while staying in his truck. But this idiot brought his wife along, who is M's friend, and she got out of the truck and tried to calm M down. She approached M, putting her arms around her and attempting to talk to her. However, M responded by slapping her across the face and yelling at her to mind her own business. This action prompted my friend, who now has a video of the incident, to call the police. M continued screaming and cursing until the police arrived. When they did, she tried so hard to portray herself as the victim. One of the two officers approached her, and she began crying and told them that I had hit her and thrown her out of the house. My friend and his wife informed the other officer that when they arrived at the house, M was yelling and banging on the door, so they couldn't confirm my innocence. After talking with them, the officer came to my door. M pointed at me and demanded my arrest. As he was about to handcuff me, I told him I could prove her lies with my phone. The officer paused and asked me to show him the footage from the outside cameras. After reviewing the video, he apologized for jumping to conclusions and assuming I was at fault. He mentioned that they received 15 calls from my neighbors. After about half an hour of dealing with the police, M ended up being handcuffed and charged with disturbing the peace, public intoxication, and a DUI. While the police were taking M to the car, W arrived and approached me to ask what had happened. I showed her the video on my phone, and the officer came over to give me the case number and other paperwork. W started asking questions about the charges, so I decided to go back inside. W followed shortly after and sat next to me. She explained that she had left her house for a quick store run, and when she returned, M was no longer in the living room, so she assumed M had gone to bed after drinking too much wine. We talked for a while, and W asked if she could stay the night. I told her she was welcome any time. W mentioned that M had to spend the night in jail, reason unknown to me, but could be bailed out in the morning. She called her parents when I went back inside to inform them about the situation and to see if they could help with M's bail, as W didn't have enough money. We had a beer together and eventually went to bed. When I woke up the next morning, W had already left to meet with her parents. Update. I haven't heard from M since that night, but her lawyer reached out to mine, informing him that he'll be representing her. Finally, we can start the legal process. I also got in touch with Jay's fiancée to get updates on her situation. We exchanged text messages, and she told me she kicked Jay out of her house. Her father and brother packed up his belongings and dropped them off at his place. She mentioned that her dad and brother wanted to confront him physically, but she asked them not to and expressed her desire to move on and leave it all behind. She thanked me for checking on her and assured me that her close friends are supporting her when she needs them. On Friday, as soon as I finished work, I hurried home with the intention of heading to my cabin for the weekend. When I got there, Bubby was in my driveway. She needed to collect her sister's belongings and had a list of items my wife wanted. I quickly went through the list and realized everything was either already packed in a box or waiting in the garage to be picked up. I informed W that I wouldn't be handling or transporting anything from inside the house because I didn't want to be held responsible if M accused me of damaging her things. I assured her that I would cover the cost of hiring a moving company to handle the packing and transportation, as I needed to focus on going to my cabin and didn't have the time to deal with M's belongings. She thought it was a great idea and wished me a fun time. She grabbed a box of M's clothes and put it in her car. Then she turned to me and asked if she could join me this time. I replied, "Sure, why don't you go back home, drop off the box, and pack a bag for yourself?" By the time I went to the store and loaded up the truck, she arrived. I locked up the house, and we headed to the cabin together. The weekend went really well, and being there reminded me of what a special place it is. It offers a beautiful view and complete seclusion, so there's no need to deal with other people. It's a place where you can truly relax and breathe. On Monday, I contacted a moving company, and today, Tuesday, 3 guys with a big truck arrived to start loading. I had every box opened and recorded the closing and lifting of each box. I took pictures of all the furniture and recorded as the movers loaded it onto the truck. I thanked them all for their patience and gave each of them an extra $1.50 as a tip. Then I sent all the recordings and pictures to my lawyer and continued with my day. The house feels empty now, but it's also clean without her stuff around. When I began this whole process, my lawyer advised me not to get rid of anything that could be considered shared, so I decided to store most of the furniture in a storage unit. Since she left, I've been sleeping in the guest room. Up until now, I've been buying new furniture, and I'll probably keep most of it in the garage now that I have the space. Even if I win the house in the divorce, I won't be keeping it because it holds too many painful memories. A few days after the movers took her things M's lawyer sent my lawyer some paperwork claiming that I damaged her belongings and demanding $1,500 from me or threatening to take me to court. In response, my lawyer sent her lawyer all the videos and pictures, asking for specific evidence of the damages she claimed. My lawyer said that this only shows the judge how unstable she is, and although it might be a hassle now, it will be strong evidence in court. It seems like her lawyer underestimated how thorough I am in documenting everything. When I discovered my wife's affair, I stumbled upon this page and read countless horror stories of what other people, ex-spouses, did to them. I am determined not to become another one of those stories. I've prepared myself for almost any situation and any false accusation she might make. I wouldn't put anything past her at this point. M calls me every other day, but I never answer. If she leaves a voicemail, I don't even bother listening to it. I just forward it to my lawyer, and every time I send something to my lawyer, he always says, "Your lawyer's dream come true. You follow my advice, and you've gathered a ton of evidence on your own. I've never had a client do so well." I'm not making it up. He says that every single time. But you know what? It puts a smile on my face every time. It's reassuring to hear from him that I'm doing everything right. It makes me feel a little better about this whole messed up situation. Around 2 or maybe 3 weeks ago, my lawyer informed me that we had enough evidence to really corner her, and if that failed, it would still work in our favor for trying. So, we set up a meeting, which took place a week ago, at a neutral lawyer's office. Before the meeting, he advised me not to react to anything M might say, because everything we do or say would be recorded and reviewed by a judge if it went to court. We arrived early in the morning and entered the office, and to my surprise, she was already there, waiting with her lawyer. The lawyers exchanged greetings, while M and I sat there in silence, waiting to see what would unfold. M's lawyer began by asking what we were willing to offer. My lawyer scoffed and said, "Considering the overwhelming evidence of infidelity and M's inappropriate behavior, the best we can offer is half of the selling price of the house and half of the savings account. That's more than what any judge would likely grant you. Essentially, you'll leave the marriage with what you came into it with." Then he stared directly at M and stated, "If you choose to go to court, I will present every message and make you read them out loud. I'll also display every photo for everyone to see, with appropriate censorship, though that wasn't mentioned at the time, and I'll have you describe in detail what you were doing in each photo. Furthermore, I'll bring up your recent charges and play the video that was recorded that night." M began to cry as she looked at me, asking if there was anything she could do to make things right. I replied, "You've been cheating on me even before our wedding. I can only prove a few weeks prior to the wedding, but I suspect it went on for much longer. There is absolutely nothing you could possibly do to make me forget or forgive you for what you've done. Just sign the papers. It's more than you deserve, and I want to put an end to this whole charade that you created." She cried loudly and uncontrollably for 15 minutes, excusing herself to the restroom. When she returned, she was still in tears, but managed to sign the papers and left shortly after. So in about a month, all the necessary paperwork will be filed, and the only thing left for me to do is sell the house. I don't anticipate anything else happening, but I could be mistaken, and if something does come up, I'll keep you informed. However, this will likely be my final post. Once again, thank you all, and I hope that my story has been helpful to at least one person out there.